Have you experienced everything that music theory has to offer, but you're not sure how or when to use it in your playing? Join me today. I'm going to explain the delicate balance between theory and practice. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome, friends, to this episode of the Play Guitar Podcast. I'm Lee, and this is the podcast that's determined to make you a better guitar player. No matter if you're just starting out or you've been playing for years, this is the show that will help you become the guitar player that you always wanted to be. If you are new here, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast and check out the description for all of the links from the show. So that's the question that I got recently. When should I stop learning music theory? You wouldn't think you'd hear that often, right? And this is something that's recent. I didn't really get that question a lot. Early on, I'd introduce music theory, and I would either get someone who was, oh, that sounds cool, or an extreme negative reaction. But now on the internet, this kind of takes those two groups and puts them in different places. Now, the people who are negative to music theory, they shy away from it. They're just learning songs. Song after song. They're wondering why they don't understand what they're doing and why they can't communicate with other players. And the other group, the players who get it, who get past that and realize there's so much more to music than just being able to copy someone. This question starts to come up. Okay, I'm learning this stuff and I just keep going and going and going, but my playing isn't getting any better at all. So today I'm going to take a shot at this question for you players who are starting to get it, but you're not seeing the results yet. So let's talk about why. When I first started this podcast, I was thinking about, okay, I've seen those videos of people and they have their little room there. I've got my little room here, and on the wall, there's some writing, positive things. You're great and keep going and stuff like that. And I thought, well, what's a one word thing that I would like for people to get when they're trying to fix their guitar playing? And I thought, why? I could put why on the wall. Right. And then I thought I could get a bunch of comments on that. Why am I even listening to this stuff? Right. So no, I decided against that there, but I still think that the word why is something that you should ask yourself all the time when you're learning music. Why do you care about learning music theory? Right. Why are you spending your time learning this stuff? Well, for me, I like to figure things out on my own. I've always been that way. And music theory is a means to figuring out music. And sometimes it gets a little addicting. So you learn one thing and you go, oh, if that's how this works, then that must mean that that's how this works. And then if this happens, then this happens. And it kind of snowballs over time. Right? When this happens, it's easy to forget why we're learning this language in the first place. And when I say language, it always reminds me of my 11 years of learning to speak French from grade school all the way to college. And at the end of those 11 years, I had a very good understanding of how the language worked. I understood it, but I was never around one person who actually spoke the language. And I couldn't use it at all, right? And if I did, someone who actually spoke French in real life would find my attempts, I'm sure they would be 100%. They would be laughing hysterically at me trying to speak French, right? So learning music theory, it's a lot like that. So it's very important for understanding how to use your instrument and communicate with your instrument, but not at the expense of actually playing the thing. Now, if you're all about it, right? If you're just all about being a music theory scholar and deep diving into all the little nooks and the crannies, and if you love to get online and argue about the finer points of music theory, this episode is not for you. This show is the Play Guitar Podcast. I'm here to help you actually playing guitar. And I'm telling you from experience that applying music theory to your playing, it will change it. And it will change it in a good way. And it will change your playing forever. But you have to realize that there's a balance that has to be taken into consideration. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about striking a balance. Practical applications versus endless study. When it comes to using music theory in my own practice and in my students' practice, what I found to be the most effective learning process is learning for the moment. You see it in different places on the internet. Some call it just-in-time learning, right? It boils down to introducing these music theory concepts that are going along with what you're learning, that are appropriate for your level or for the task at hand. Here's an example. If you're a beginner, understanding symmetrical scales is not only way to advance, but learning about symmetrical scales would not apply to the songs that you're learning, the typical songs that a beginner would be trying to play. If you're just starting to play songs, how about this? Understanding chord theory and understanding chord progressions would apply to those songs. This is what you're working on at the time. And that would balance it out. That's the balanced scale concept. One side, you've got the application, and then on the other side, you've got the theory to that. I've been teaching a lot about borrowed chords lately and secondary dominant chords. In fact, I was teaching about 5 of 4 chords, right? You've got a 4 chord. That's the 4th degree of the scale, a chord built upon that. And then you talk about, well, what's a 5 chord away from that, right? So it's kind of like a temporary key change in the middle of a chord progression. And this was in our Q&A last week. And at the end, I went through it enough that everyone understood the why and the how of that chord. But even though it was understood, I could see it. There were unsure faces in the chat. And why is that? Because they had never played a song that used one of these chords. They didn't have a reference song to attach this new information to, which means I will be teaching it again and again until they have that, right? Maybe I'll bring that to them. I'll bring some songs that have those chords in there. But if a student was learning a song that used that particular chord, knowing the how and the why of it would relate directly to what they're doing, and you would retain that knowledge and you would use it again and again and again. How about knowing enough to play versus getting lost in music theory? You can get tripped up. There are 2 places where you can get really tripped up. Number 1, you don't know what music theory to learn. And number 2, you don't stop and apply what you've learned. So let's talk about this. If you dip your toes into the water of music theory and it doesn't seem to apply to any of the music that you're playing, you're a little bit farther down the line. You've gone too far. We got to back up a little bit. In fact, everyone should have a basic understanding of how music theory works as they move into intermediate guitar. I'm working on this, so keep your eye out for my theory edition of my Elevation Toolkit series, which is going to be pretty cool. I've got a few of those coming out, and this is going to be scales and chords and chord progressions, all the basics of music theory that an intermediate guitar player should know. But as you go forward, there comes a point where you might start learning things that don't apply to the music that you're playing. And feeling lost in music theory is very common at this stage. You're out of balance and you need to bring your instrument and performance skills up to that music theory. We need to go back and focus on the application. How about this? Transitioning from learning to applying music theory in your playing. So the key to using music theory as a tool instead of as a distraction is in your songs, the songs that you're learning. I hope you have a nice set of songs that you're learning at all times. If you're playing songs, you have no idea what you're playing, you're just copying, you're going to need basic theory. If you're playing songs and you don't know what notes are in the chords that you're playing, you need basic chord theory. If you're playing songs and you want to make the chords sound better, you need intermediate chord theory. Do something to these chords. Let's say if you're playing songs and you want to write a melody or you want to improvise, you need to learn how scales and chord progressions relate to each other. In short, if you are trying to play something that you don't understand why it works, that's where you need to be, or where you need to work up to. Once you understand why a piece of music, chord progressions, scales, why these work in your songs, you get something great. You start getting control over the music. You can start to make decisions instead of just copying. You can stop following and you can start creating. So what should you do? Take out a piece of paper. I know you love it when I say it. Take it out. Write down all the things that you're playing that you are unsure of. You might think you know what you're doing, but you're not 100% sure. Then I'm going to ask you to find a good resource that teaches music theory step by step. I would recommend my roadmap series of courses that are only available to members of the Academy. I've put in the appropriate theory lessons for each topic as you work your way from beginner to advanced. You're only learning what's there for you at the time. It's all there in a way that when you advance, you have not just the skills to play, but the knowledge to bring what you've learned to every musical situation. And there's a special link for that in the show notes here. This is playguitaracademy.com/membership. Also, in our membership, we get together every Wednesday for Q&A. And then the first Monday of every month, we have our master classes where you have some new stuff for you to learn every single month. It's a lot of fun, and I hope to see you over there. And I hope I answered that question. When is it right to stop learning music theory? Can I stop now? I think it's best done in pieces, and I think it's best done when you have some way to apply it so that you can remember it. And this was a lot of fun. I will see you next week. I'm going to call it That's a Wrap. Thanks for joining me today for the Play Guitar Podcast. Make sure to hit the button below to subscribe to the show. And if you have benefited from this podcast, please leave a favorable Apple Podcasts iTunes review. It's the best way to make sure we get this very valuable content to more guitar players around the world. And if more help and structure and results in your guitar playing sound good to you, what are you waiting for? Play Guitar Academy is here. Join the world's most exciting and carefully playing guitar system. And together, we will build your online home base for guitar. Thanks again, and I will see you on the next episode.